Hi everyone, this is Teacher Louie, and for today, I am going to teach you modal auxiliary verb. Modal verb is a verb which expresses the mood and the manner of an action indicated by the main verb. So this is different from what we used to know about verb, which is an action word, but then this modal verb is called also as a special helping verb because it has different functions, modalities that will be discussed in today's lesson. And here are the list of modalities and functions that we have here in modal verbs. So we have the ability, the possibility, the permission, the request, obligation, advice, prohibition, prediction, and a lot more. But then if I'm going to ask you, what is the difference between these two functions? The permission and the request. So what's the answer? When we say a permission, we are asking for an approval. But then when we say a request, we are asking for a favor. For example, ma'am, sir, can I go to the comfort room? You're asking an approval from your teacher. And when he or she said yes, that's the approval. You can now go to the comfort room. Just like, bawal lumabas. Pag sinabi ni teacher, bawal lumabas, bawal lumabas. Sir Dap, how about a request or when you're asking a favor? Let's say, for example, Sir Dap, I wasn't able to enter my class yesterday because I feel initiated. But sir, I have a favor. Can you please do it for me? Oh sure, what's that? What's your request? Can you, sir, repeat the discussion for me so that I could follow the lesson and, sir, I could study also. Thank you very much, Sir Dap. So that's the difference between the two functions, the permission and the request. So just remember that when you're asking a permission, you're asking an approval. But then if you're asking a request, you were asking for a favor. So on this particular part, I'm now going to give you the pattern on how are you going to construct your own sentences using modal auxiliary verb. So later on, I'm going to present to you all the list of modal verbs together with their modalities and functions. Okay, in constructing a sentence using modal verb, do not forget the pattern S, M, V. So what does it mean? S stands for the subject, M stands for the modal, and V stands for the verb or the main verb. Here's the example sentence. The pandemic caused by COVID-19 can make people realize how important life is. So in this sentence, where is the subject? The subject is the pandemic. And how about the modal verb? Okay, so the modal verb here is the word can. How about the main verb? Okay, very good. The main verb here is the word make. The pandemic can make people realize how important life is. The word caused by COVID-19 is just part of the sentence. I just wanted to make it more relevant as we are facing this kind of thing. And this example sentence is obviously a complete thought because it has a subject and it has a verb. Okay, just a friendly reminder over here. Do not change the verb into any other kind of verb. Always use base form of the verb whenever you are using modal auxiliary verb in your own sentences. Even though you are using past time modal verb, say for example, the word could, the word should, and the word would, always use base form of the verb. Okay, so I have two sentences here. Which one do you think is the correct one? Well, I guess the correct one is the first sentence because it follows the correct structure, which is the SMV. The subject, the modal verb, and the verb, which is the main verb. And that's how you construct your own sentences, the correct construction of sentences using modal auxiliary verb. And now, let's proceed to the discussion of the modal verbs and the functions. Okay, let's proceed to our first modal verb, and that is the modal verb can. Modal verb is used to express a potential or ability or inability. It is also used to express a permission. Let's use modal verb can in an example. Number 1. I can sing, but I can't dance. That is an example of ability and inability. I have the ability to sing, but I don't have any ability to dance. Second example, the government can extend help to those people who are in need. Obviously, the government is a subject, the modal is can, and look at the verb extend. It is written in base form of the verb. So, the government has the ability to extend help, to give help to those people who are in need. Third example, the contact tracing team can respond quickly amid this pandemic. The contact tracing team has the ability to respond quickly amid this pandemic. So look at the examples given. It follows the pattern subject, modal verb, and of course, base form of the verb. With that, you can easily write and create your own sentences using the modal verb can. Okay? So now let's proceed to our second modal verb. Okay, so our second modal verb is the modal verb could. So sir, when do we use could? Could is used when you are saying a weak possibility. Another thing, could is used when when you are asking a permission in more polite way. Another thing, could is used as the past tense of the word can, and obviously is also indicate the ability in the past. Now let's look at the examples. Rob said that he could solve the problem. That is an example of ability in indirect speech. Third, he could drive a car when he was young. If you want to tell something from the past, you guys may use could if you are pertaining to your ability. And so, if you are using modal verb could, always remember to use base form of the verb. Even though you are using past modal verb, just like would, could, and should, always use base form of the verb. We don't change its form. We don't change the verb into past even though we're using past modal verb, because the rule is verb should always be in base form. Don't forget that. Next, let's proceed to our third modal verb. And here we have the modal verb may. So when do we use may? May is used when we are asking or when we ask a permission or making a polite request. It is also used to express a wish or to ask for something. And of course, as we all know, may and might are more formal than the modal verb can and could. So if you want or if you wish to use these words in a much formal gathering, or say for example in a formal place, you guys may use may and might instead of can and could. Let's look at the examples. Okay, let's start with the first example. May I borrow your copy of Julius Caesar? So that is an example of permission. Again, a permission is when you are asking for an approval. If I could lend you, if I could allow you to borrow my book. Another example, number 2, this pandemic may result huge damage in our industry. So may also is used to show a moderate certainty. But don't forget this very important reminder for modal verb may. It is more formal than can, obviously. Let's say for example, in the faculty room, when you ask somebody from the teachers, may I excuse Mr. Dapdap? That is a much formal way to excuse somebody. But then some students would use, can I excuse Mr. Dapdap? That's something informal. So somebody or some teachers would correct you. So those are the things that you really need to consider and you really need to remember. Okay, let's now proceed to our next modal verb. And we have here the modal verb might. So when do we use modal verb might? It is used as the past equivalent of the modal verb may, and it suggests a very weak possibility. Say for example, number 1, I think it might rain today. There is a weak possibility that will rain today, and I'm not sure if it's gonna rain today. So that's one. Second, the frontliners might experience stress every day because of the task overload. But then we know that our frontliners really experiencing a lot of stress every day because of, the increasing COVID-19 positive here in the Philippines. And here is our third and last sentence. There might be a roadblock today because of road widening. So this sentence shows that there is a weak possibility that there might be a roadblock today because of the road widening. So might is used to suggest a possibility, a weak possibility, something that might happen or something that might not happen, just like our given examples here. Next modal verb, we have shall and should. So it is used in the second and third person to express a promise or an advice, just like MacArthur, I shall return. Okay, now let's proceed to our examples. Number 1, you should stay at home to avoid the virus. That's a piece of advice. Second, seeking advice. Should I go outside to buy medicine? Well, that's good. Next example, how about shall? Shall is used to state or to express a promise also and advice. And always remember that the past time modal verbs should, could, would are more formal than the present ones. So don't forget that thing. That's a piece of advice. Okay, so for our next modal verb, we have the modal verb will. So will is used in the second and third person to express simple future time, while would is used to make a polite request. Just like what I've mentioned a while ago, that the past time modal verbs would, could, should are more formal than the present ones. So I have here examples, so let's go and check them out. So for our examples, we have here, I will achieve my goal this 2020. I will help the SK chairman to conduct seminar about safety precautions. Okay, so for our last sentence, I wish and I hope that this pandemic will end soon so that we can go back to our normal life and we can see each other face to face and not in this virtual class only. And of course, so we can go back to our beloved St. Dominic Academy. And that's it. So for our next modal verb, we have the modal verb must. So when do we use modal verb must? It is used to express necessity and obligation. So what do you mean by necessity? It is something that you need to have. How about obligation? When we say obligation, it means that you are obliged to do something. And that's it. Now, let's look at the examples. The students must pass their requirements on time to avoid deductions. And that is your obligation as a student. You need to pass your requirements on time to avoid deduction. Second example, you must wear a face mask in going to the market. Nowadays, it is a must for every one of us to wear face masks all the time to avoid getting the virus. It is a must for every one of us to really follow the implementations given to us by the government and by the Department of Health. It's for our safety, so please stay at home. Our next modal verb, we have the modal verb used to. When do we use modal verb used to? It is used to express a discontinued habit. Here is the example. We used to go swimming every evening. So that is an example of discontinued habit. Another example, every one of us used to attend study lesson every Sunday. That is another example of discontinued habit. Follow the pattern, subject, modal verb used to, and the main verb, which is the verb. Next, our modal verb is the modal verb need. So when do we use need? It is also used to denote obligation and necessity. Let's say, for example, the hospitals in Cebu City need beds for COVID-19 patients. So, the Cebu City needs a lot of bed for their COVID-19 patients. And that sentence states that it's a necessity because the Cebu City is actually looking for beds for their COVID-19 patients. We need to visit the church to pray for our country. This sentence denotes that it's an obligation and it's a necessity. Please include in your prayer the healing of our country. Now that we are suffering from this pandemic, prayer is really the source of our strength. So I encourage everyone to pray every day, especially at night before going to sleep, and ask for guidance, safety of your family, and of course, the healing of our Mother Earth. And that's it. That's the modal auxiliary verb. You guys could now use these modal verbs in your day-to-day conversation. I hope you learned something on this discussion. We can now go back to our classroom. See you on the next video. Thank you very much.